I was halfway through writing my vows when the knock came. 3 slow taps, not hurried, not uncertain, just deliberate. I barely registered it. My pen hovered over the page, still caught in a sentence about how, after everything, I'd finally found peace. Stupid. It was 10:13 a.m. The wedding was at 4. My son, Dylan, had gone to pick up my cufflinks from the tailor across town. I was alone in the hotel suite, sitting in the sun-drenched corner near the balcony, still in sweatpants, my ring box half open on the table like it was watching me. Everything felt good. Quiet. Earned. I opened the door expecting room service. Maybe Dylan had ordered me breakfast or something dumb like a groom's mimosa. Instead, it was just a manila envelope. No bellhop. No courier. Just the envelope, flat and scuffed, leaning up against the threshold like a lazy threat. I scanned the hallway. Empty. Not even the hum of the elevator. I stood there a second too long, waiting for some explanation to chase after it. A prank? A gift? A last-minute note from Olivia? I brought it inside. No markings. No return address. Not even a smudge of ink. Just sealed with a single strip of tape, folded with military precision. My name wasn't even on it. If I hadn't noticed the weight, I might have tossed it aside. But it had weight. Something rigid shifted inside, small, metallic maybe. I sat down, peeled it open. The first thing I saw was a photo. Old. Slightly faded. One of those glossy 4x6 drugstore prints from the early 2000s. Olivia, unmistakably Olivia, younger, hair longer, sun-bleached, standing barefoot in the grass with her arms wrapped around some man I didn't recognize. His back was to the camera, but her face. Jesus. I'd never seen her look like that. Wide open. Intimate. Her head rested in the crook of his neck like it had always belonged there. Beneath the photo was a necklace, not just any necklace. A thin silver chain with a dainty little charm, a dragonfly. My breath locked in my throat. That necklace belonged to my sister. Emma. Dead 20 years. I hadn't seen that thing since the week of her funeral. And yet there it was, a little more tarnished, the wings slightly bent, but still intact. I picked it up like it might dissolve. Last was the note. Folded, typed, courier font. Just one sentence. If you don't leave now, it'll happen again. No signature. No context. No explanation. I sat there staring at it all, heart suddenly pounding behind my ribs like it had forgotten how to beat properly. My first instinct was to think someone was trying to sabotage me. Olivia had an ex with a grudge? Someone sick enough to dig up my sister's memory and weaponize it? But that necklace. That exact necklace. Only 2 people in the world had ever known where Emma kept it, me and my mother. I looked at the photo again, and that's when I noticed something else. Olivia was wearing a sundress I remembered seeing in a box of Emma's old things. My hands started shaking. I stood, walked to the balcony, and looked down at the front lot. Guests were arriving. Friends from out of town, cousins I hadn't seen in years, a few of Olivia's church people with those artificial wedding grins plastered on. I spotted Dylan near the valet, laughing with someone. It was all happening. I was in it. But all I could see was that dragonfly charm turning cold in my palm. And Olivia's face in that photo. The way she looked at that man, like no one else was real. I sat back down, slowly, and slid the ring off my finger. Then I turned off my phone. I must have stared at that necklace for 10 minutes without blinking. It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. Emma drowned the summer after her 22nd birthday. I remember every brutal second of that week, the police report, the coroner, the quiet whisper from my mother when she asked me to pack up her things so she wouldn't have to walk into Emma's room ever again. I packed that necklace myself. I remember wrapping it in tissue paper, sealing it in a small velvet pouch, and placing it in the box with the others. My mother tucked it away into her dresser. I never saw it again. And yet here it was, tangled in the same chain. Same chipped wing on the charm. Time hadn't erased its weight or the way it still smelled faintly like her vanilla lotion. That dragonfly had lived around Emma's neck for 2 years straight, even in the shower. And now it was lying on my hotel room table like a message sent from the grave. I set it down like it burned. The photo wasn't any kinder. Olivia wasn't just hugging the man. She was draped over him. It was a full-body press, legs slightly bent, toes off the ground, her mouth just inches from his. Her eyes were closed. That soft, delighted smile, it wasn't posed. It was captured, Candid. The way you smile when you think no one's watching and you're exactly where you belong. I didn't know him. Not clearly. He was older, maybe late 30s in the photo. Tall, broad shoulders, clean cut. There was a watch on his wrist, something expensive, and a faint scar near his temple. That was all I had. My fiancée never mentioned someone like this. She told me she'd only been seriously involved with one man in her 20s, a toxic type, emotionally controlling, long gone. We talked about it once on our third date, over bourbon and pork sliders. I remember her eyes getting glassy, the way she said, "There are some chapters one wish I could erase." But she never erased this. I flipped the photo over, hoping for a name, a date, anything. Just a blank back. Same with the note. The typing was oddly mechanical. Courier font, like from an old typewriter or a fake ransom letter. If you don't leave now, it'll happen again. What would happen again? I held the words up to the light like they might bleed more meaning. The phrasing wasn't vague, it was pointed. It assumed I already knew what it was referring to. But I didn't. At least, not yet. And that's when something cold settled in my gut. It wasn't just the necklace, or the man in the photo, or the note. It was the fact that it all came now. Not a week ago, not a month ago, but the morning of the wedding, when I was most vulnerable, most committed, most trapped. Whoever sent it had been watching, waiting, not just for the right moment to deliver it, but to maximize the impact. It was an ambush. My thoughts started spiraling. Olivia and the mystery man. The necklace and Emma's death. It'll happen again. 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 What happened the first time? I reached for my phone, instinctively, then stopped. No, not yet. I couldn't call Olivia. Not without sounding insane. And I didn't want to tip my hand. Not until I understood what kind of game I was being pulled into. I reached for the ring box instead. Flipped it open. The platinum band sat there, gleaming like it had no idea how close it was to being buried under motel dust. I closed it again. Some instinct older than logic, whispered, "She's not who you think she is." And neither was Emma by the end. I don't remember getting dressed, but somehow I ended up in jeans and a black t-shirt, sitting on the edge of the bed, the photo on the nightstand, the necklace coiled beside it like a warning. The envelope, ripped in half. I tried to tear it calmly, to tell myself this was just someone playing games. But the way the paper gave way under my hands, jagged and trembling, said otherwise. I dialed my mother. No answer. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Nothing. Then Dylan. He picked up on the second ring, his voice light. "Hey, Dad. I got the cufflinks, heading back now. Want coffee? Where are you?" I asked, and I heard the tension leak through my voice like a cracked pipe. He paused. "Union and Fifth. Everything okay?" I stared at the window. "Yeah. Just get here safe, all right." Another beat of silence. "Dad, what's going on?" I didn't answer. Just hung up. A knock at the door. Lighter this time. Then a voice. "Tommy? You in there?" "Olivia." My body stiffened like I'd been caught hiding something, which was funny, considering she might be the one hiding everything. I crossed to the window instead of the door, peering through the sliver in the curtain. There she was, in her silky, pre-wedding robe, ivory with gold trim, hair already curled. She looked radiant. Calm. Except not quite. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't fidgeting the way she usually did when nervous. She just stood there, one hand against the doorframe, eyes scanning the hallway like a hawk waiting for something to move. Then, for a split second, she turned toward my window, and our eyes locked. And something in her expression changed. Not surprise. Not love. Not even impatience. Just recalculating. Like she was assessing a risk. I stepped back, heart rattling. My fiancée, the woman I'd nearly walked down the aisle for, had just looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a tumor before slicing it out. I didn't open the door. I waited. 10 seconds. 20. Then her voice again, lighter this time, almost sing-song. "Baby, you okay? Just wanted to see if you liked the boutonniere we picked out." That voice. That damn voice. Sugar slick. Coated in control. "I'm fine," I said through the door, keeping it shut. "I just need a minute." A pause. "All right. But don't disappear on me, Tommy. Not today." Then soft laughter. She walked away. I didn't move until the hallway was quiet again. Then I picked up the necklace and held it tight, Like maybe if I squeezed hard enough, I could wring out the answers. I tried my mother again. Still nothing. I sat down, heart pounding, trying to think like someone who hadn't just had the rug yanked out from under their entire life. But every thought circled back to one thing. What if this isn't about the wedding at all? What if this whole thing, meeting Olivia, falling for her, proposing, was just chapter 2 of something that started 20 years ago? Emma drowned at a lake retreat, supposedly slipped after too much wine. But she'd left behind a half-written journal, odd bruises, and silence. So much silence. The kind that always felt like someone was trying to not say something. I reached for my wallet. There was $500 in cash, a backup credit card, my driver's license. Enough to vanish if I wanted to. And I was starting to want to. I looked around the suite. The vow notes still on the table. The empty garment bag from the tailor. A tray with crusty room service from breakfast. My son's duffel near the door. Everything screamed normal. Except none of it was. And then, like it had been waiting for me to see it, I noticed something else, something new. The hotel room key. Only not mine. A second one. Tucked behind the ice bucket. A different room number. Room 908. My room was 1013. I picked it up. Just held it. Felt the cold plastic press against my fingers. This wasn't carelessness. This was placement. Like someone wanted me to find it. I didn't know who to trust. Not my mother. She was gone silent. Not Olivia. Not even Dylan. What if he knew something he wasn't aware of? And that's when the thought landed. Quiet. Definite. I'm not walking down that aisle. I'm not answering any more doors. I'm leaving. Not to take a breather. Not to think things through. To disappear. I left through the service exit. No goodbye note. No dramatic escape. Just one foot in front of the other, walking past trays of uneaten pancakes and housekeepers too busy to look up. The staff elevator took me to the basement. From there, I slipped through the loading dock and out into the alley, the air thick with the smell of fryer grease and wet cardboard. I ditched the hotel key in a sewer grate, threw my phone into a trash bin behind a diner. That part hurt more than it should have, not because I'd miss it, but because of the texts I knew were about to flood it. Dylan, my mother, Olivia, maybe even the officiant. Panic and confusion. But that was the point. Let them wonder. I walked 3 miles before I flagged a ride. The guy who picked me up had a busted Toyota pickup and a dog named Chester who drooled on my jeans the whole time. He didn't ask questions, just kept chewing sunflower seeds and spitting the shells into an old Folgers can. Somewhere around the state line, he muttered, "Bad day?" I just nodded. He dropped me at a gas station in Vermont. I paid him in cash, bought a burner phone, and turned it off immediately. 2 more rides and 1 night in a bus station later, I found myself in a town I'd never heard of, with a population that could probably fit inside a Costco. No one knew me here. No one wanted to. I rented a small house on the outskirts, tucked behind a hardware store and a closed-down bakery. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, peeling paint, old radiator that knocked like it was haunted. It was perfect. The landlord was a guy named Ken who only cared that I paid on time and didn't cook meth in the shed. I paid 6 months up front in cash. He didn't blink. For groceries, I walked to a store a mile down the road and paid in 20s. For work, I found a contractor willing to take on an older guy who could lift lumber and didn't ask about W-2s. My name, for now, was Mark. Just Mark. No last name. They called me City Boy until they realized I could install drywall straighter than most of them. The days were mechanical. Wake up, eat, work, sweat, sleep, repeat. But the nights were the problem. That's when the photo came back. That necklace. The charm pressing into my palm like a brand. Olivia's eyes in the hallway, recalculating. And the note. If you don't leave now, it'll happen again. What was supposed to happen again? I kept circling that phrase like a predator too scared to pounce. Was it about Emma? What if Olivia had nothing to do with her death, and I'd just torched everything for a coincidence wrapped in paranoia? But then I'd hear Olivia's voice in my head, soft and sugary. Don't disappear on me, Tommy. Not today. Like she already knew someone had disappeared before. Like she expected it. I tried calling my mother once from a payphone. Blocked number. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I couldn't risk her calling back and dragging me out of this half-life I'd built. I stayed away from mirrors. Couldn't stand the way my own face looked. Hollow, bloodless, older than I remembered. I ate enough to keep my hands steady. Drank enough to fall asleep most nights. No one from my old life found me. I made sure of that. But the silence didn't bring peace. It brought questions. Why that necklace? Why now? Why wait until the morning of the wedding? And why, in that moment, did it feel less like sabotage and more like rescue? One night, in the middle of a rainstorm, I sat out back on a broken lawn chair with a blanket over my shoulders and the burner phone in my lap. I turned it on, half expecting an explosion of missed calls and texts. Nothing. No one had the number. I stared at the empty screen, then powered it back off. Maybe I wasn't running from Olivia. Maybe I was running to Emma, to the truth, or to whatever was left of it. Winter came fast in that part of Vermont, a hard freeze by mid-October. The kind of cold that sinks into your joints and stays there like unpaid rent. My breath fogged the air each morning as I walked to the job site, boots crunching through frost, the dragonfly charm tucked in my wallet like a splinter under the skin. I didn't talk much. Didn't have to. The guys on the crew were the kind who measured respect in silence and back pain. They didn't ask questions, and I didn't give them answers. I lifted beams, poured concrete, patched insulation with numb fingers. At night, I sat in that peeling rental house, chewing through cans of soup and pretending I was okay. But I wasn't. I hadn't slept a full night since I disappeared. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma. Or Olivia. Or the man in the photograph whose back haunted me more than any face ever could. Sometimes it blurred. Emma becoming Olivia, Olivia speaking in Emma's voice, the necklace floating between them like a cursed offering. And always the same question echoing louder than the rest. What happened 20 years ago that never made it into the obituary? Emma had drowned. That was the official word. Summer trip with friends. Too much wine, a slippery dock, and a delayed search. By the time they found her, her skin had gone soft and blue. I was 25, and the only thing I remember clearly is the feeling of wrongness. Like someone had rewritten the ending of her story with a red pen and expected the rest of us to smile through it. Back then, I believed my mother when she said grief distorts things. That Emma's bruises were just from the river rocks. That the time gap between the fall and the 911 call didn't mean anything. That sometimes people just vanish. But the necklace showing up in that envelope cracked the lie wide open. I started digging. Not online, too risky, too traceable. No, I went analog. I took the bus 3 towns over to a library with microfilm archives and spent hours hunched over blurry reels of local news. I pulled old articles, printed copies, made notes in a spiral notebook like some crackpot chasing ghosts. There wasn't much. A few lines in the police blotter. A community in memoriam post written by a woman who used to teach Emma piano. One grainy photo of the search team near the riverbank, Emma's favorite sandals visible at the edge of the frame like a bad punchline. But then I found a name I hadn't remembered. Caleb Wexler, 23, close friend of Emma's. Gave the initial statement to the police. Claimed he was inside the cabin when she fell. I didn't remember him at the funeral. Didn't recall hearing his name once after that summer. No social media footprint now. Nothing in recent voter rolls. Like he'd evaporated. Or like someone helped him disappear. The name kept circling back in my head. Wexler. Wexler. Something about it itched. Like a word I used to know and forgot how to pronounce. I brought it up to one of the guys at the construction site, real casual. Asked if he'd ever heard of anyone named Wexler around town. The look I got wasn't what I expected. You mean Wexler like the people who used to own that resort up north? Near Bear Cliff. Resort? I played dumb. No idea. Just heard the name in passing. He shrugged. Old money. Real hush-hush type. Sold off everything years ago. Place burned down, I think. Of course it did. I went home that night and stared at the wall for hours, connecting dots that didn't want to stay connected. Emma. Caleb Wexler. A burned-down resort. And Olivia, wrapped around a man I couldn't name, but who might have been Caleb 20 years older. The theory felt insane, but so did the silence. I started walking every night. Long walks. Miles at a time. Past the hardware store, through the dead neighborhoods, down to the lake where the fog clung to the trees like secrets. I started talking out loud to myself, to Emma, to the night. I don't know what you got into, I said once, standing at the water's edge, but I think someone made damn sure you never got out. And still, the question gnawed at me from the inside out. Who sent that package? Because if it wasn't Olivia, then someone else out there knew what happened. And they wanted me to know, too. It hit me while I was cleaning out the shed behind the rental. Mid-January. Snow piled against the door, wind slicing under the gaps in the wood like a blade. I was organizing rusted nails in a box of busted extension cords when I found it. A plastic milk crate filled with yellowed magazines, a half-burnt poker set, and someone's forgotten stack of old greeting cards. I almost threw it out, but there was something weirdly familiar about the handwriting on one of the envelopes. Blocky. All caps. Not identical to Emma's, but close enough to stall my hand. Inside was a birthday card. Generic. The kind you'd get at a gas station. Big balloon font that said, "Another year, another adventure." Inside, the message was crossed out with a black marker and replaced with something typed, cut out, and taped in. Watch the way people look at you when they think you're not watching. That's where the truth lives. No signature. No return address. Nothing. It didn't make sense until it did. Because suddenly I was back in Emma's dorm room, weeks before she died, watching her hold a little box in her lap with this weird twitch in her mouth, like she wasn't sure whether to laugh or run. Some secret admirer crap, she'd said, waving it off. Probably Caleb being dramatic. I didn't push. I should have. She showed me the gift. A necklace, not the dragonfly, a different one. A small anchor on a chain. Not expensive, but deliberate. She claimed it was cute. Claimed she was fine. But that twitch? That hesitation? It's been 20 years, and I'd buried the memory in a drawer somewhere behind grief and bourbon. But now it was clawing its way back like it had been waiting for me to slow down and remember. I started pacing the shed, muttering to myself. The anchor. The dragonfly. The damn typewritten notes. All of it wrapped in soft threats and soft smiles. I couldn't tell if the card in the crate was really from Emma or just a mind game I was walking into. But it was the pattern that got me. It all felt like déjà vu with teeth. Emma gets a cryptic gift. Weeks later, she's dead. I get a cryptic gift. Hours before my wedding. Same tone. Same precision. Same ghost-like hand pulling at the threads. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't being warned. I was being targeted. Or maybe tested. Because what if this wasn't about Emma at all? What if this was about me, and what I'd do differently? I went back inside, dug through my duffel, and pulled out the notebook where I'd been scribbling timelines and names. I added a new column. Gift received strange message behavioral shift disappearance. Emma/disappearance. Me. I stared at the pattern. It didn't prove anything, but it kept repeating. Subtle clues, emotionally loaded objects, pressure points disguised as nostalgia. You don't send someone their dead sister's necklace by accident. That was surgical. And whoever did it, they wanted me to see the echo. It was all too precise. I poured myself a drink and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the snowbank where deer had left tracks. Somewhere out there, someone had pulled this string twice. And I was starting to believe Emma hadn't been the first. Maybe not even the second. Which raised a darker thought. How many people has this happened to? And why now? Why me? I remembered Emma's last voicemail. She'd called the night before her trip and left a rambling message on my machine about sunscreen, about how she was finally feeling clear, whatever that meant. She ended it with, "You'd love this place." It's like the world goes quiet. The world did go quiet. It swallowed her whole. And now, 2 decades later, I was starting to hear its teeth grinding again. It was buried between the pages of an old book Emma gave me when we were kids, Walden, of all things. The irony made my teeth hurt. I hadn't touched it in years. I kept it more out of guilt than anything. We used to argue about Thoreau when we were teenagers. She loved the idea of retreating into the woods to find truth. I thought it was the lazy man's way of dodging real life. But after she died, I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. I was flipping through the yellowing pages late one night, restless, the wind howling outside like something angry trying to claw its way in. Somewhere near the end, just before the page where she'd underlined, "Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth," a postcard fell out. Cream-colored. A little warped. The edges curled like it had been through humidity and time. The front was a photo of a lake. The same damn lake where she drowned. On the back, in her handwriting unmistakably hers, slanted to the right, messy like she always wrote when she was in a rush, was this: "If something happens to me, look at the face, not the words. They always lie with words. No greeting. No, love you. Just that." I must have read it 100 times before my brain stopped buzzing long enough to feel what it meant. She knew. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the ending, but Emma knew something was off. Someone had been lying to her. Someone close enough to look her in the eye. And that's when the image hit me like a dropped hammer. The man in the photo with Olivia. The one I never got a good look at. What if he wasn't a stranger? I pulled out the photo again. Studied the jawline. The scar by the temple. The way his shoulder curved forward just slightly, like he carried guilt in his posture. Then it clicked. The Polaroid from Emma's fridge. Summer of '04. A lake trip. She was in a red bikini, hair wet, laughing. Next to her, same jawline. Same scar. Younger, but him. Definitely him. Caleb Wexler. The close friend who gave the only statement after Emma's death. Who disappeared. Who never showed up to the funeral. Who'd supposedly moved to Europe or rehab or wherever ghosts go when you don't want to explain them. And now here he was, 20 years later, wrapped around Olivia. I stood up so fast the chair behind me toppled. My chest was tight, vision tunneling. I paced, muttering no, 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 like it was some kind of spell. Because that changed everything. This wasn't some random warning from a stranger or a jealous ex or a paranoid conspiracy I'd spun up in my own loneliness. This was connected. Olivia wasn't just hiding something, she was linked to it. She'd been with Caleb. Maybe still was. And I'd almost married her. I slammed my fist against the table. Pain flared, sharp and grounding. I'd loved that woman. I had memorized the rhythm of her laugh, the way she stirred her tea, the exact placement of the freckle on her right thigh. I was going to build something with her, something permanent. But now I couldn't stop wondering. How long had she known who Emma was? How long had she known who I was? Was I a target? A project? A rerun? The thought made my skin crawl. I held the postcard to the light again. Look at the face. She wasn't talking about Caleb. Not directly. She was talking about everyone. The liars. The ones who smile while they slowly fold the ground beneath you. Olivia had looked at me the way someone looks at a problem, just before solving it. And suddenly, I saw our whole relationship for what it was. A performance, well-rehearsed, gentle, beautiful, and completely fake. She hadn't just lied. She rehearsed the truth until it sounded real. And I clapped for it. I proposed to it. I sat down, trembling, rage curdling in my throat. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was hunting. The town hadn't changed much. Still smelled like moldy pine and cheap gasoline. Still had that one main street where every storefront looked like it was $50 away from going out of business. Still had the same faded, "Welcome to Harridge Falls" sign with the chipped paint and bullet hole in the corner. It had been 2 decades, and I still knew exactly where the road curved before the gas station and how the lake always seemed too still, like it was holding its breath. Emma died here, or was killed here, and somewhere between those two lies, I was going to find the truth, or burn the whole town trying. I parked the rental car under a busted-out street lamp and walked 3 blocks to the Harridge Weekly building. Still standing. Still pathetic. A boxy 2-story with a crooked W in the sign, like the building itself was tired of pretending it mattered. Inside, it smelled like ink and dust and boredom. The receptionist was a teenager chewing gum and watching videos on her phone. She barely looked up when I said I was looking for someone who'd covered the Emma Brant case in '04. That'd be Marion. If she's not dead. Helpful. Marion Parks wasn't dead. Just bored. And suspicious. She met me in the back office 15 minutes later, holding a manila folder like it was a cigarette she couldn't smoke. Late 60s. Blunt-cut, gray hair. Eyes sharp enough to fillet you with one blink. She gave me the kind of stare usually reserved for cops and ex-husbands. "Emma Brant," she said, not offering a seat. "You the brother?" I nodded. She snorted. "Took you long enough." That set the tone. She dropped the folder on the table and slid into her chair. Inside was a stack of clippings, nothing I hadn't seen before, but beneath them was a handwritten note. Dated July 14th, 2004. just 4 days before Emma died. It was addressed to the paper, but never published. If something happens near the lake this weekend, don't assume it was the water. No name. Just initials, CW. Caleb Wexler. I looked up at Marion, but she was already watching me, lips tight like she was trying not to say too much. I tried following up, she said. Sheriff told me it was a prank. Told me to drop it. And then, wouldn't you know it, a young woman slips and dies 2 days later. Neat little bow on it. Did anyone else get suspicious? She gave a dry laugh. Suspicion's expensive in a place like this. And Wexler? He had money. Quiet money. The kind that doesn't show up in press releases, but has its name buried in cabin deeds and resort permits. And after Emma died? I asked. Gone, she said. Like smoke. 1 week he's driving a black Lexus, eating shrimp cocktail at Lakeside Grill. Next week? Dust. House up for sale. Business closed. Poof. She leaned in. Some people, she said, her voice lower now, know how to disappear well. Especially after they've done something they don't want printed in ink. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth hurt. He ever come back? I asked. Her gaze sharpened. Why are you really here? I think my fiancée knew him, I said. Maybe still does. She blinked, just once. But it was enough. Oh, she said, and sat back slowly. So that's why your name sounded familiar. I read the announcement. You're that Thomas. What do you mean that Thomas? She looked uncomfortable for the first time. There was talk. Nothing printed, of course. But when Olivia Granger got engaged to a widower from the city last year, a few people around here raised eyebrows. Small towns don't forget old faces. Or their ghosts. Olivia's last name. Granger. She told me her father died when she was a teenager. Said her mom raised her alone. Never mentioned Caleb. Never mentioned this place. Did Olivia ever live here? Oh yeah, Marion said, folding her arms. Back in the early 2000s. Went by a different name for a while, Livy Wexler. My lungs forgot how to function. Wexler. Olivia wasn't just connected to Caleb. She was his daughter. I stood up, nearly knocking over the chair. Everything inside me twisted into something sharp and vicious. She lied about her past. Lied about who she was. Lied about everything. And now it made sense. The timing, the necklace, the stare in the hallway. I had walked straight into a goddamn family cover-up, wearing a tux and a stupid, hopeful grin. You all right? Marion asked, her voice distant. I turned away from her. My hands were trembling. I don't know who sent me the warning, I muttered. But I think they're the only reason I'm still breathing. The phone rang just after 2 a.m. Burner, buried deep in the pocket of my jacket. I hadn't turned it on in weeks, maybe months. But after the trip to Harwich Falls, after Marion's deadpan bombshell about Olivia's real name, I needed noise. I needed connection, even the threat of it. I powered it up earlier that day and let it sit on the nightstand, screen dark, until it lit up. Unknown caller. My hand hovered over it like the damn thing might explode. And maybe it did, just not the way I expected. I answered on the third ring. Silence at first, then the sound of someone breathing. Slow, steady, familiar in a way that punched me straight in the spine. Tommy. Her voice was thinner than I remembered. I didn't respond. Couldn't. She tried again. Tommy, it's me. Don't hang up. My mother. I hadn't spoken to her since I disappeared from the hotel. I'd left her in the middle of a whirlwind, and she'd let the silence stretch a whole year. Now, in the middle of the night, she calls like she's been waiting for some invisible permission. You found me. I finally muttered, my throat cracked and dry. I didn't try to, she said quickly. Someone left your number. On the porch. Taped inside a book. What book? Walden. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed. She knew. She knew I'd found the postcard. That I'd gone down the rabbit hole. Whoever gave her my number knew, too. There was someone playing conductor behind the scenes of my ruined life, and they had their hands on all the right strings. I need to see you, she said. Why now? She hesitated. Because it's not about the wedding anymore. It never was. The line went quiet again, like she was weighing every syllable. There's something I didn't tell you. About Emma. And that was it. That one sentence took every screw I'd used to keep myself together this year and ripped them out one by one. What do you mean? I asked. What didn't you tell me? I can't do this over the phone, Tommy. Please. Come home. Home. Like it still existed. Like I was still the same person who used to come over on Sundays with a six-pack and talk about nothing. I don't know if I can trust you, I said. I know, she replied. But I think I'm the only one left who can give you the part that's missing. It wasn't a plea. It was something colder. Final. The kind of tone people use when they've already burned the last page of a story and you're the only one who doesn't know the ending. She gave me an address, not our old house, but a cabin upstate she sometimes used to retreat after my father died. Said she'd be there for the weekend. After that, she was done. Done with what? She didn't say. The line went dead before I could ask. I didn't sleep. I didn't pack. I just sat in the dark until the sun crept over the hills like it was sneaking in after a night of bad decisions. And then I drove. Every mile closer to her felt like threading a needle with a live wire. My palms were slick. My jaw was locked. And in the back of my mind, something whispered, she knows everything. She always has. The only question left now was whether she'd tell me before it was too late. She was already on the porch when I pulled up, wrapped in that same brown wool coat she used to wear when she'd wait for Dad outside chemo. Her hands were wrapped around a chipped mug. Steam curled from it, but she didn't drink, just stared into the woods like they might speak first. I stepped out of the car and slammed the door harder than I meant to. She didn't flinch. You look older, she said. You don't, I lied. Inside, the cabin smelled like dust and cloves and secrets. We sat across from each other at the small table by the window. Same table we'd eaten pancakes at when I was a kid. Same knife marks on the edge from when Emma used to cut rubber erasers into little hearts and leave them for me in my school bag. And just like that, she began. I knew Emma didn't drown by accident. No preamble. No hesitation. Just dropped it like a live grenade on the table between us. I didn't breathe. I tried to believe the story at first, she continued. Tried to swallow the wine excuse, the wet doc, the grief counselor's script. But you were there, Tommy. You remember the bruises. You remember how quiet her boyfriend got. Caleb, I said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. He had a way of disappearing from responsibility while staying right in the picture. Emma loved him, defended him, said he had a dark past, like that made him poetic. She got up and walked to the bookshelf, pulled down a worn leather photo album I hadn't seen in 20 years. She opened it slowly, slid out the photo. The same one from the envelope. Olivia and Caleb, younger, radiant, tangled up like they had nothing to hide. That's not Olivia, I said dumbly. No, my mother replied. It's Livia Wexler, Caleb's daughter. She was around Emma a lot that last summer. Just a teenager then. Always watching. Always listening. I think she learned from him. My mouth went dry. You sent the package. She looked at me. I found the photo when I cleaned out the attic 2 years ago. Found the necklace in a box of Emma's things I couldn't bring myself to throw out. And I remembered that day, the last time she came home. She was shaking, Tommy. She was afraid. But she said she couldn't leave him. I stared at her. Why didn't you tell me any of this sooner? Her face hardened. Because I didn't know if you'd believe me. Or worse, I didn't know if you wouldn't care. That cracked something in me. You think I would have married her knowing who she was? You almost did. I didn't know. No, but you felt something was wrong. And I had to trust that. I had to trust that when you saw the photo, the necklace, the warning, you'd walk. And you did. My hands clenched. You played me. I saved you, she snapped. Then softer. I had to. If I'd said it outright, you would have found a way to rationalize it. You would have gone to Olivia, asked her, and she would have lied to your face, just like her father did to Emma. And you? You would have believed her. The room felt too small. You waited until the day of the wedding, I said, voice shaking. You waited until the dress was steamed, the ring bought, the guests en route. Why? Why then? She looked up at me, eyes glassy but dry. Because if you left then, there'd be no going back. I needed to make sure you burned the bridge. That no apology, no explanation, no second thought could drag you back into their world. I stood. I couldn't sit anymore. So what now? I asked. You tell me Caleb was a murderer. His daughter nearly became my wife. And we just drink tea and call it closure? She shook her head. No, Tommy. Now you understand what kind of people they are. She reached into her coat, and pulled out another envelope, thicker than the last. Sealed. What is this? Everything I have. Notes. Letters. Things I never told the police. Things I was too scared to say out loud. I kept it all. For you. I took it. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear. From clarity. There was no doubt anymore. They killed my sister. Then they tried to rewrite the story with me as the next chapter. And I'd almost let them. The envelope sat in my lap like a confession written in bone. I hadn't opened it yet. Just held it while my mother poured tea like this was any other afternoon, and not the unraveling of a 20-year lie that nearly pulled me under for good. She stirred her cup, then looked at me, not with apology, not with pity, but with that same calm she wore the day we buried Emma. The kind of calm you only earn when you've buried enough truth to know it never stays dead. You're angry, she said. You have every right. I'm not angry, I replied. But I didn't have the word for it. She nodded anyway. I know. We sat like that a while. No sound but the tick of the kitchen clock, the same one Emma broke when we were kids, trying to see if time could be rewound. It couldn't then. It sure as hell couldn't now. You still haven't asked why Olivia came into your life when she did, my mother said, almost absently. I looked up. You think she came to me on purpose? I think, she said carefully. She came to you when she no longer had him to follow. Caleb. She nodded. He died last year. Car accident in Arizona. I followed the obituary trail. Fake names, old photos, closed records. He reinvented himself 3 times before the end. And Olivia, she disappeared from everything the day after he was buried. I felt my skin tighten, like it was trying to crawl away from my bones. She didn't just move on, my mother said. She reset, took a new name, new city, found you. And maybe she did want a different life. Maybe she believed she could outrun the blood in her veins. She leaned forward. But Tommy, I saw her. At your engagement party. I watched her talk to your friends, charm your colleagues, laugh with Dylan. And I saw it, just for a second, when someone mentioned Emma. What? She flinched, covered it well, changed the subject. But I saw it. I gripped the arms of my chair. She knew? I asked, barely above a whisper. She knew. Maybe not all of it. Maybe not how deep the rot went. But she knew her father was part of something that destroyed your sister. And she still stood there, smiled, kissed your cheek, and planned her vows like she wasn't building them over a grave. The room spun. I tried to keep my breath steady, but the walls had started to hum. She looked me in the eye. I muttered. She told me she loved me. She probably did, my mother said, not unkindly. But love doesn't erase truth. It doesn't make silence innocent. I thought of that moment outside the hotel room. The knock, her voice, her waiting behind the door, pretending everything was normal. Her calm, her poise. The way she said, "Don't disappear on me, Tommy. Not today." She wasn't just worried I'd run. She was afraid I'd remembered. I had to let you choose, my mother said quietly now. I couldn't stop you. I couldn't forbid it. You needed to walk away on your own. That's why I waited until the wedding day. I looked at her, not with anger, but with something heavier. You didn't save me, I said. You gave me a loaded question and watched me decide whether to pull the trigger. She nodded, slow and tired. That's what being a parent is, sometimes. I finally opened the envelope. The contents spilled across the table. A short letter Emma wrote but never sent. A photo of Caleb's car parked outside the cabin days after she died. A journal entry that ended mid-sentence. A police record. A sealed envelope marked return to sender. Proof. Not courtroom proof. Not justice proof. But truth. Thick, undeniable, and scarred. I sat back. The truth wasn't cathartic. It didn't heal anything. It just made the silence honest. She knew. Olivia knew. And she still planned a life with me on top of my sister's grave. I didn't leave the cabin right away. I stayed an extra day. Watched the sun spill over the frost-bitten pines. Let the quiet settle into my bones like mortar between bricks. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. It just is. When I finally drove back to the city, I didn't go to my apartment. Didn't return to the office. Didn't check the mail or the missed calls or whatever social media storm had followed my vanishing act like a cloud of mosquitoes. I went to the cemetery. Emma's grave hadn't moved. still near the willow tree, still with that same modest headstone that read, Emma Grace Brandt, loved wildly, gone too soon. A lie we paid good money to carve in granite. I knelt down. No speeches. No rehearsed monologue. I just sat with her. Then I pulled the dragonfly necklace from my coat pocket, the same one someone had used to snap me awake after 2 decades of sleepwalking, and I placed it gently in the grass beside her name. No fanfare. No melodrama. Just the weight of a symbol returned to its rightful place. And I whispered, I'm sorry it took me so long. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I'd already burned through all the tears. I left the grave and walked back to the car with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt since I was a kid lying on the roof of our house, listening to crickets and pretending the stars knew what they were doing. That night, I turned my phone back on. It buzzed with static fury, voicemails, texts, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. But only one message came in as I stood there holding it. Dylan. I answered. There was a pause then. Dad? His voice cracked a little, just like when he was 12 and trying not to cry after losing his dog. Yeah, I said. It's me. Silence. Then, I'm glad you left. I sat down on the edge of my bed. I mean it, he continued. I didn't get it then. I thought maybe you'd lost your mind. But I saw her too. The way she watched you. Like she was already planning the apology for something she hadn't done yet. I closed my eyes. She was good at pretending, I said. Yeah, Dylan replied. But you weren't bad at listening. You felt it, didn't you? Before the package. Before the photo. You felt her. Yeah, I did. There was a long pause. Then he said, quietly, you didn't just save yourself, Dad. You saved me too. And that was it. The win. The only one that mattered. I didn't call Olivia. Didn't write. Didn't curse her name. There was no revenge to take. Just the satisfaction of absence. And the small, steady power of not letting history use me for a sequel. I wasn't a victim. I was the man who left. And that made all the difference.